All right, folks, this is our second lesson of our Cold War unit. Our objective is to examine the events in Europe in the early years of the Cold War. How did it help to achieve, maintain, and/or threaten world peace? So we're going to explain how the events in Europe in the early years of the Cold War helped to achieve, maintain, and/or threaten world peace. I've got two images here. We've got a propaganda poster on the left. On the very top it says, "This man is your friend." He's labeled as a Russian. You can see that his uniform reflects the Russian uniform. And on the bottom it says, "He fights for freedom." The citation down underneath it, the title, "This man is your friend, Russian, he fights for freedom." This was published by the U.S. government in 1942. All right, so I highlighted the date here. That is important to note. So looking at just this propaganda poster, what words would you associate with this poster? Is it positive? Is it negative? Who is this directed towards? Is this directed towards U.S. citizens? Is it directed towards citizens of Russia? How are you supposed to feel when you look at this poster and read these words? Now come over here to the right. You've got a political cartoon. This is called Arm Wrestling for World Domination, published in a British newspaper called Daily Mail in October of 1962. So again, I highlighted the date. That's important to know. And down here there's a quote, "Okay, Mr. President, let's talk." Up here you've got a couple things labeled. The Soviet leader, Nikita Khrushchev. That's this gentleman right here. This is U.S. President John F. Kennedy. Then you'll notice President Kennedy has got his finger over a button, which is attached to a cord that leads to this. This hydrogen bomb is labeled USA, and the Soviet leader, Khrushchev, is sitting on that bomb. Then over here, you've got U.S. President Kennedy is also sitting on a hydrogen bomb, and that's labeled USSR. And it's maybe a little difficult to see, but you can see Mr. Khrushchev's arm right here. He also has a finger pointing, hovering over a button, and there's the cord leading on the back of the table. We can assume that it's leading down to the front of this hydrogen bomb. So what does this political cartoon tell us? Is this positive? Is this negative? How does this make the reader feel? What is the message here? Who's the audience? What can we learn about what's going on in the United States and in the world in 1962 based on this picture? Okay, scroll down here. We are looking again at our Cold War definition. I'm going to repeat this so that you understand what the Cold War was. And again, it is so important that you do not think that the Cold War was a war fought in a cold area of the world. What was the Cold War? It took place from 1945 to 1991. It was a state of political and military tension after World War II between powers in the Western Bloc, the United States and its capitalist allies, and powers in the Eastern Bloc, the Soviet Union and its communist allies. Same map as we saw in Lesson 1, titled "What is the Cold War?" You've got your NATO members, Warsaw Pact members, USSR aligned, Western aligned and/or colonies, communist, non-USSR aligned. Okay, again, we've seen this before, but we're going to go through it again. The Western Bloc, USA and NATO allies. NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The economic system among the USA and NATO is capitalism. It's the economic system that we have in our country today. The political system is democracy. Citizens of these countries have the rights and freedom to vote and elect their representatives. The United States wanted to contain communism, so they pursued the policy of containment, keeping communism where it already exists and trying to prevent it from spreading to other areas. The Eastern Bloc, Warsaw Pact, Allies, and the USSR. The economic system of the Warsaw Pact and USSR was a command economy. What is a command economy? It is an economy in which production, investment, prices, and incomes are determined centrally by a government. So essentially what this means is a government would tell an industry that you are going to make this one product. You are going to set the price at this price. And you're going to pay your employees this salary or hourly rate. So everything in a command economy is controlled by the government. The usual result of this is that the workers end up being very, very poor, and the government ends up with a great deal of money. When a government is setting income levels, they tend to set income levels very, very low, not within a living wage for anyone, and people end up very poor and hungry. The political system in the USSR was communism. The USSR wanted to promote communism and spread these ideas to other countries. All right, moving on. We're going to talk a little bit about a Cold War timeline. The early years of the Cold War in Europe goes back to World War II, during the war. In 1941 to 1945, the United States and the USSR become allies. Let's look at how that happens. The relationship between the United States and the USSR had always been strained because the political ideologies each supported capitalism and democracy in the US and communism and a command economy in the USSR. They were opposed to one another. Their relationship was tested during World War II when they signed the non-aggression pact called the Nazi-Soviet Pact with Nazi Germany in 1939. So the Germany, Hitler, and Stalin of the Soviet Union signed this non-aggression pact, basically a promise to each other that we're not going to attack the other. Stalin's decision and the Soviet Union's occupation of Poland in 1939 led the United States to publicly condemn the USSR. So the United States was not happy with the Soviet Union for their role in occupying Poland in 1939. While angry with the USSR, the United States did not forget that Nazi Germany was the greatest threat to Europe. United States President Franklin Delano Roosevelt hesitated to sever or cut all ties with the USSR and instead sought to improve relations as Hitler picked up speed in 1941. In June 1941, Hitler broke the Nazi-Soviet Pact and invaded the USSR. So Hitler betrayed Stalin. Germany betrayed the USSR, okay, and invaded. This was the perfect opportunity that President FDR was looking for the United States to gain a new ally to defeat the Nazis. The United States sent an aid package that provided significant military supplies and other assistance to their allies, including the Soviet Union. As a result, Stalin left the Axis powers and joined the Allies. In the Ed Puzzle, I'm going to have you answer this question. Why did the United States and the USSR fight together as allies in 1941? All right, moving on. During the war, there were several disagreements between the United States and the USSR. In spite of these differences, the defeat of Nazi Germany was a joint success. But this victory over the Nazis did not magically fix the relationship between the United States and the USSR. The United States was still concerned about the spread of Soviet communism and Stalin's totalitarian rule. The USSR was frustrated with America's hesitance to treat it as part of the international community and their slowness in entering World War II. As the war was nearing the end, the distrust continued to grow. So the United States still distrusted the Soviet Union and was still very concerned over the spread of communism. On the other hand, the USSR was very frustrated with being left out of the international community, and the USSR was frustrated with the United States' slowness in getting involved in World War II. So in the Ed Puzzle, I'm going to have you answer these next two questions. Explain why the United States and the USSR never fully trusted one another. What does the American propaganda poster above reveal about the relationship between the United States and the USSR in 1942? So looking again at this poster, answer that question. All right, continuing with our Cold War timeline, the early years of the Cold War. From February to July of 1945, there were two major war conferences and agreements made between Great Britain, the United States, and the USSR. And that's what we're going to talk about right now for a couple minutes. World War II ended in 1945 and started a relationship between the remaining world powers, the United States and the USSR. Prior to the official end of World War II, the Allies, United States, USSR, and Britain, hosted two conferences, basically a big meeting. The first conference was Yalta in February of 1945, and then the second, Potsdam, in July 1945. These conferences were to help decide what would happen to Europe, specifically Germany, at the end of World War II. So, answer this question in the Ed Puzzle. What was the purpose of the 1945 war conferences in Yalta and Potsdam? In between the conferences, delegates from 50 nations met in San Francisco, that's in California, to start the United Nations, or the UN, in April of 1945. The United Nations, much like the original intent of the League of Nations, which we learned about following World War I, was created to maintain international peace and security. By May 1945, Germany surrendered to the Allies. So, answer this question in the Ed Puzzle. What major events occurred between Yalta and Potsdam? What major events occurred between Yalta and Potsdam? All right, I'm really trying to keep these Ed Puzzles to 15 minutes or less. So here we've got a picture of the Yalta Conference. The three big players here. This is Winston Churchill from Great Britain. This is President Roosevelt from the United States. This is Joseph Stalin. This is February 1945 Yalta Conference. Yalta is in Crimea. So these three are meeting in Yalta, and they are discussing how they're going to reorganize Europe, specifically Germany, after the war is over. Germany has not been defeated yet, though. The war is still going on. Over here on the right, this is fast forward to July of the same year, 1945, and this is in Potsdam. Potsdam is in Germany. Again, you have sitting in the same order, this is Winston Churchill. Now, this is U.S. President Harry Truman. FDR passed away. His vice president was Truman, and he becomes president. Years later, he's then elected president. And this is Joseph Stalin. So the Potsdam Agreement between these three allies was for the military occupation and reconstruction of Germany. That was the focus of this meeting. We're going to scroll down here real quick and just look at a couple more points. Again, on the left, you've got points of the Yalta Conference. On the right, you've got points of the Potsdam Conference. A couple things that I want you to know about the Yalta Conference. The plan was to divide Germany into 4 occupied zones. Germany would be demilitarized and denazification, basically removing all Nazi policies or laws that had been created during the Nazi reign. This is very interesting. Germany would pay reparations partially in the form of forced labor. Okay, let's be honest. Forced labor is slavery. The Declaration of Liberated Europe would allow for free elections in Eastern Europe. So free elections in Eastern Europe, this is key. Also, Stalin pledged to allow free elections in Poland and to form a government of national unity. That's very important to note. Over here, we see for the Potsdam Agreement, Germany would be demilitarized and disarmed, so that is consistent between the two meetings. German society would be remade along democratic lines by repealing all of the discriminatory laws from the Nazi era. So this is consistent as well. This essentially is that denazification process. Germans deemed to be war criminals would be arrested and tried. And this did happen. Many Nazi leaders were arrested, tried, and many of them were executed. I'm going to have you finish up with the Ed puzzle. Here's one quick extra credit question that you can put in. You put your response into an email or into a Google Classroom response to me. Here's your question. What is your favorite Thanksgiving food? Just answer that question. You'll get extra credit. Thank you.